Just a little bit late. Well, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Small Business Development Committee. Today we've got a full agenda, and I appreciate all the presenters being here. But we'll call this meeting to order, and the first order of business is we'll have Representative Ray Martinez lead us in prayer.
Thank you, Chairman.
Hold on, let me get your number turned on. 24?
24. Thank you, Chairman. Dear Lord, as we gather here today to do the people's business, we want to thank you for all the blessings you're giving us. And we also ask you to lay your hands over us as we decide on the state of Georgia. We also ask you all these things in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Ray. Appreciate that. Well, good morning. Good morning again. I guess we're going to go ahead and start this rolling with Susan Shows. I think you're first on the agenda, young lady, and you have the podium is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. We really appreciate this opportunity to be here today on this very busy day for you. And I would also say that we appreciate at the Georgia Research Alliance 30 consecutive years of state funding for our programs. And I've brought this piece. You each have our highlights piece from 2022 in front of you. It describes how GRA collaborates with the most research-intensive universities here in Georgia, and they're listed on the front at the bottom of the page. Those 8 schools are responsible for more than 98% of the research that's done at all of the colleges and universities in Georgia. So they are indeed research intensive. Inside, we have examples of how GRA carries out its 2 primary purposes, research and entrepreneurship. This first of expanding research at our universities. You see some of the things we did last year. The right-hand page describes how we build new companies around that research, and you're going to hear from a couple of those companies in just a minute. But I want to call your attention to the box here at the bottom of the page. It shows Georgia's national rankings for university research. In 2021, that's the most recent year for data at the national level, Georgia ranks number 8. That was just announced in January of 2023. A year ago, we were number 9, but we have moved up 4 spots in the last 5 years. That's a really big deal for our state, and we thank you for your investments in GRA's programs because we think that definitely is making a difference in our national rankings. On the back, in the bottom right corner, you can see our 2022 return on investment, almost $1.5 billion. 30 years of state investments have produced a return of $11.7 billion, and I would tell you those are direct returns only, no multipliers. I want to also point out that GRA is an affiliate of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, so we're happy to be sharing time with them at this meeting today. Being an affiliate means we do joint activities, we share some board members, and we even live together at 270 Peachtree Street. So that's something we wanted you to know. But Mr. Chairman, I think the best way for us to demonstrate our return on the state's investment is by letting you hear from a couple of our customers. 2 of our 226 companies are here today, and we'll begin with Codoxo. CEO Mashir Ahmed is here to give you a short update.
Great, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mushir Ahmed. As Susan said, I'm the CEO and founder at Codoxo. I want to start off by thanking Mr. Chairman and the members of the committee for inviting us to present here today. We know you have a busy day ahead of you, so we really appreciate you taking time to see the exciting work that we're doing at Codoxo with the support of the GRA. Our goal at Codoxo is to help ensure our healthcare system stays affordable and effective for everyone. Healthcare fraud is a massive problem in the U.S. with estimates ranging over $300 billion lost annually in the US alone. This dwarfs other types of fraud like credit card fraud, which is only $12 billion lost annually in the US. We've seen a lot of innovation happen in the credit card fraud detection space. Unfortunately, not much improvement has happened in the healthcare fraud detection space. Since healthcare spending is going up every single year and fraud is calculated as a percentage of spend, healthcare fraud is estimated to grow to $600 billion in the upcoming years. If healthcare agencies are struggling to address the amount of fraud today, how will they ever manage the increased amount of fraud and sophistication that is about to come in the coming years? The existing technologies to address this problem have been rule-based, and there's been some application of AI technologies that is still reactive. What I mean by that is they're really good at identifying fraud we've seen in the past, we've identified or we've predicted to happen, but they struggle to manage the evolving nature of fraud that's coming out with new schemes every year that steals hundreds of billions of dollars in the US every single year. So researchers at Georgia Tech did a multi-year study to identify what is the state of the industry and how we could fill these gaps and address them. And my PhD dissertation at Georgia Tech helped develop a proactive AI capability that identifies newly emerging scheme in a timely manner, gives this information to our customers, allows them to take action to stop bleeding and minimize the financial impact at those organizations. Codoxo is a Georgia-based organization. Our core research was done at Georgia Tech. The intellectual property is owned by Georgia Tech. With the support of the GRA through their grant initially, we were able to begin the commercialization process. Without that avenue, we would not have been able to take this work from the academic setting into the real world. Once we started off as a company, the Georgia Research Alliance Venture Fund helped invest in the company so we could begin and start growing our company in Georgia. We are headquartered in the state. We have over 60 employees, majority of whom are based out of here in Atlanta and other parts of Georgia as well. So fraud is factored into the healthcare premium increases that happen every single year. Through our work at Codoxo, we help contain these premium rises and ensure that healthcare remains affordable for a greater number of people within the US. So we've received about $31 million of investment from Georgia entities. GRA has been a major supporter of Codoxo. We've also brought in capital from other places like Silicon Valley and other places to invest in the state of Georgia, to hire people, train people, and support the headquarters that we have in the state here. We do support today, our customers span 30 million members, so we process healthcare claims for 30 million people in the US, ensuring that fraud is not committed with their identities and through other means in the space as well. We've saved about $500 million since inception in the American healthcare system, and just last week, we were recognized as the 20th fastest growing company in the Southeast and 7th fastest growing private business in the state of Georgia. So I want to take a second to explain what does healthcare fraud look like. So just a few examples of what fraud is like. It's basically filing for services that weren't performed, or falsely diagnosing patients to bill for services that weren't needed or medically necessary for them, or sometimes billing for something that's more expensive than the actual service that was performed, or also you're splitting up your bills, a package bundle, you break it down into smaller pieces and you get paid more than you're actually deserving to get paid off. These are just a few examples. Majority of providers are good, but there's always the few that are bleeding the system of significant dollars. GRA introduced us to the Georgia Department of Community Health here in Georgia a couple of years ago, and they decided to launch a trial of our technology here for the members of the state. So we did a 12-week limited scope trial where we only analyzed data for 10 specialties in one line of business, one claim type, and released the results to the state. So with 12 weeks of working with our data, they identified almost $6 million that they could recover immediately, and another $7 million that required further investigation and may have led to additional recoveries. So the Department of Community Health decided to use our technology and expand the scope that was initially discussed So not only were they're going to deploy the technology to individual physician claims, which are professional claims, but also claims coming in from hospitals called facility and institutional claims, and also dental claims, and go beyond the fee-for-service line of business to the CMOs as well as the state health benefit plan. And we've been engaging in the process of gaining the approvals to deploy ourselves in the state. It's been almost 2 years now. We just obtained a critical approval this Friday afternoon, and we're really excited to begin our partnership with the state and deploy our technology to ensure that the state is saving money and not bleeding money to fraud in the system. So I'd like to open it up for any questions. I do want to thank, again, everyone for your support of the GRA that allows us to grow into what we are today and make an impact in the state. Thank you so much.
Great presentation. I know we've got a bunch of questions. Representative Bernal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that one of the goals of Affordable Care Act was to cut down on fraud. So, for example, my husband, we were at our primary care doctor, and he got an EKG. And we went all of less than 5 minutes to his cardiologist, and they did another EKG. And I asked them, why can't you just call down there and get the one that was already done? So are you saying that those are like examples of fraud when his heart couldn't have changed that much within 5 minutes?
So that's not necessarily an example of fraud. That's an example of waste, where tests can be shared as opposed to repeating and recharging the insurance or the agency that's supporting that member. But fraud is basically, for example, there was a case where a cardiologist, where a member would come in, a patient would come in, he would do an echo test and say, oh, you need to get a stent immediately in the next 72 hours, or you're going to have a massive heart attack. And that wasn't true. When actually his case wasn't that severe, he didn't have to do it that immediately, and he could have waited out longer. So those situations where you're forcing a patient to go through a treatment that wasn't necessary by falsely giving a false diagnosis. There was another case where an oncologist, every patient that came in would say, you have cancer, and forced them to go through chemotherapy. And later on, it was discovered that majority of his patients never had cancer. He just wanted to get paid for chemotherapy, which is a very significant amount of payment from insurance, and he is today in prison. So those are examples of fraud that we tackle. But that specific example is of waste. You could save money by not repeating the test, but it doesn't fall under fraud.
But then if they continue to do that, then that would be a fraud, because we have excellent insurance. My husband was a Vietnam vet, so I have TRICARE, and I have the highest part of TRICARE. So which means I pay nothing when I go to the hospital. I had a bill. I had a surgery. I think it was $112,000 for that surgery, and I only paid $900. So if people have really good insurance, that can become fraud, because they can say, okay, well, they can pay for it. They're going to get the money regardless.
Absolutely. So fraud, the definition of fraud basically involves intention. If the intention is to make more money, then yes, absolutely, it can fall under fraud as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Colbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. And you might have already answered my question when you talked about the guy with the chemotherapy. He's in jail right now. Yes. And that's where I was leading to with this $300 billion in fraud. Is this something that the Attorney General would need to make a high priority to go after these and make an example out of?
Absolutely. So our work involves interacting with law enforcement officials. So we do sometimes make referrals to the Office of Inspector General, the FBI in certain cases. So it does have a law element, and a lot of times these do lead to criminal cases, and people are put behind bars for this.
Thank you.
Representative Bernal, did you have a follow-up?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. With the closing of all the hospitals in Georgia, and so one of the things that happens is that those that are underinsured or not insured are going in, and of course that the hospital doesn't make any money. So could that increased fraud because of the fact when someone comes in and they have really, really good insurance that they start to overbill them for certain things?
It could be the case that when someone has really good insurance, there are some cases where the facilities may waive your member copays and say, okay, you don't need to pay anything, we'll just bill everything to insurance. So that's not legally allowed. They are still responsible for their portion based on the insurance agreement. So there are cases we've seen if someone has really good insurance where in an effort to get paid more through the insurance, there will be certain schemes that people have employed to make more money in those cases.
All right, thank you.
Well, I've got a couple of questions. Who are your customers?
So we work with commercial private health insurance companies as well as government agencies.
Okay, so the health insurance companies purchase your service, and you use AI and the technology y'all have developed to find waste and fraud and can identify it.
Yes.
Super. Just out of curiosity, and I don't want, if you don't feel comfortable, do y'all get paid a fee based on savings, or is y'all's fee so much? And how do you charge for the services you provide?
So there are two different mechanisms where we charge. If it is fraud, we do not get paid a percentage of savings because we do it on a license fee basis. We don't want a conflict of interest if things move into the court proceedings, so we only do it on a license fee basis. When it comes to waste and abuse, those are more done on a percentage of savings because there's no law enforcement element involved there. It's just a correction of payment happening in those cases. So we do get a percentage in those particular cases.
In the follow-up that I have, so then y'all have not only the AI, but there's a legal aspect to y'all's organization as well, and so you have to be careful which path you're going down.
Yes,
So,
yes.
So, okay, well, great. Well, congratulations. I also serve on the health committee for quite a few years, actually, since '05. So we're talking almost 18 years. And one of the issues we've had is the high cost of insurance and the high cost of health care. And it looks like you're going to be able to help us out here.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mashir.
Yeah.
Our next company is Micron Biomedicals, and Steve Damon, CEO, is here to speak with you today.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Very much appreciate your time today to help me, let me tell the story. It's a long story, and I'm going to tell it in a few minutes about how Micron Biomedical grew, especially with the support of Georgia Research Alliance, spun out of Georgia Tech, and I think we have a pretty exciting story. Is anybody going to get the slides up, or is there somewhere I can find them? So Micron established probably, I think it was about 8 years ago out of Georgia Tech. Two ex-students of Georgia Tech came back to the university to work with a professor who actually arguably leads the world in this space, what we call microarray, used to be microneedle drug delivery. And if it wasn't for, frankly, if it wasn't for those initial loans, which GRA gives, I'm sure at risk, to get us started, and you, as you earn through their loan program, we did that. We accomplished, we went through the loan program, and in the end, we actually were part of the Georgia Research Alliance Venture Fund. So I would say that we may not be here if it wasn't for that program. Yeah, and I just want to make that clear. So Micron Biomedical is a drug delivery, what we call drug delivery, vaccine delivery company. What we're doing is we're taking products, drugs and vaccines that are normally injected, and we're putting them into this little device right here, the product, which you would take like that, you'd put on your skin, you would push a button, you'd hear a click, you'd feel a click, you'd then take it off and throw it away. And essentially you would have given yourself a vaccination, or some lower skilled caregiver is giving you a vaccination, or you've given yourself the therapeutics that you need, And we can actually remove needles from quite a few products, especially around vaccinations. So that's pretty exciting stuff. Also, what's very important about what I just did, this is a dry product, so it doesn't require refrigeration. Distribution is a lot easier, again, because you're not interfacing with the healthcare system. That's our story, and I want to tell you now a little bit about how that's impacting Georgia and the rest of the world, frankly. So like I just said, in order to accomplish this, and this took a lot of years optimizing, utilizing the structures at Georgia Tech, ATDC, CGMI, again, Georgia Research Alliance, we needed a simple design, something that was fairly easy to use. As you just saw, you just push it on, you click it, and you pull it off. The clicking, actually, you're pushing, basically what you're doing is you're pushing about 125 little drug depots into your skin, in the intradermal. But the clicking and the little thing is just to tell you you've pushed hard enough. It's your thumb or your finger that's actually driving them into the skin. So no applicator to make this happen. There's no other technology. There's no sharps waste, which is also very important if you're going to rely on a product like this to be given in certain situations. So we think that we can reduce basically vaccination hesitancy rates. We can, again, reduce interface with the healthcare system. And we think we're going to save a lot of money. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about where we are. That's the quick graphic of what I just did. Simple self-administration, less skilled caregiver administration. And you're probably already thinking, what does that really mean for access? Sure, in high-income countries, in some of the best places in Georgia, this is going to make things very convenient for people. It's going to, again, keep them out of it's going to save money, keep them away from the doctors and things, especially during the cases of pandemics. We could actually put this thing in the mail, send it to you in the mail, or you could pick it up at the drive-thru. But in cases like in areas where social access isn't quite as easy as it is for driving through a drive-thru at the pharmacy, you actually have a product, as I said, now that can be put into the mail. It's also very important for global impact. So we have a product that has a global impact, it has a national health security impact, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute. And we have one that has, right here in Georgia, a great impact on what we're doing in Georgia and how we're delivering our vaccines and our drugs. Again, just what I just showed you, the little cartoon or graphic is showing you just how simple it is to push into your skin. This is another cartoon to show what it does. Those little depots of drug and polymer dissolve in the interstitial fluid in the intradermal area of your skin. You don't feel a thing. Then they turn into essentially the same thing you would do as if you had an injection, except they're not in the intramuscular area. They're in the intradermal.
Would you repeat that, please? Say that one more time.
Okay. This replaces the injection. So you push these 125 to 150 tiny little arrays. They're sharp arrays made out of a mold, so that you can push them into your skin. And once they're in the skin, they dissolve by the interstitial fluid in the intradermal area. And now you have your vaccine or your therapeutic, which is picked up by the circulatory system and delivered, just like you would if you had an injection. Micron's done a study, for example. We did a study pre-pandemic, which was for seasonal flu. We did it here utilizing Emory as well as Georgia Tech, and it is actually done in the early stages of our work with GRA and such. And we did seasonal flu, and we showed in that study that we were better than an IM injection. So we had a better response than an IM injection, intramuscular injection, the one that hurts, the one that you feel in your muscle for a couple of days. This was pre-pandemic. So we had people, and that's one of the things that all our companies do. We bring people into Georgia who get exposure to Georgia into our system. We had like scientists from around the world, from the largest seasonal flu company, and frankly, after months and months of discussions, they just decided there wasn't a business model for that product. And that's because it was inexpensive and they didn't really see a reason for doing it. Pandemic came along and everybody became a lot more aware of vaccinations and intradermal and how all that works, and guess what? It's very valuable now. Same data. And I'll just follow that on with an important, and then I'll get into the corporate stuff, important story, and this is really the story of the day. There's only one other place I've talked publicly about this. It'll be out in a couple of months, and it's exciting, again, for us to have this global impact and everything we're proving. We just finished, we're funded by the Gates Foundation for this project. Bill's very aware of this project. It's one of his top projects. We just finished a study in the Gambia, which is called a phase 2 study, to show data that we could vaccinate children as young as 9 months for measles and rubella, which is a leading cause of death for them. And our data's out. We all saw it. I'll go to this point because it's not public, but I can say this a little bit. We collaborate with the CDC as well. And of the 18 guys on the phone, half of them CDC. The top CDC guy on the phone said, best call he's had in 10 years. Couldn't sleep. extraordinary data coming from, there's a lot of things happening when we push it into the intradermal, the way we're doing it, dry polymer, a lot of things are going on biologically, and we're having extraordinary results. So there's going to be a lot of attention for this company, just like all of our companies, coming into Georgia as we grow our company. So Micron's growing now. It's on a very quick curve to grow. We closed our Series A, our first equity financing, in November of last year. Importantly, we brought in our U.S. government, BARDA. I don't know if you know, about a little over a year ago, they created their own venture fund. And you've heard of them giving away money or loaning or what do you want to call it to the big Modernas and stuff. This is actually their venture fund. They want to return just like anybody else. So we are one of their early investments, and in fact, our largest investment to date. So they're going to ask us to do certain things for national health security, but as well, they want us to be profitable and return the money 10 times, 20 times, just like any other VC. So they're one of our investors. Another German company came in, and the Georgia Research Alliance Venture Fund came in. Growing the company, putting out extraordinary data. I believe we'll have a major impact. We're going to do a study. It's on the protocols in place right now for doing what I call a placebo study for self-administration in Georgia. We're going to mail it out to everybody, do all the protocols, and make sure that what I just showed you actually can work. That's never been done, self-administration study. We'll do it right here in Georgia. And we have commercial manufacturing scaling up right now, which initially will be in Germany. Eventually, we believe we'll have a lot of it right here. That's Micron Biomedical.
Cool. That's great. That is great. I hate shots, so I'll be one of your biggest customers. Well, the board is lit up. Chairman Colbert, you were number 29, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. Your first bullet point, you reduce unnecessary and undesirable patient exposure in public medical settings. When my first granddaughter was born in 2013, I found out I had to get a whooping cough vaccine. So anyway, I had to go to a walk-in clinic to get that. December, flu is full blast in December, so I'm the only one in there that's healthy, and everybody else has got the flu. I sit there to get that shot. So I love that idea. My only question would be, I know with the COVID vaccine, you have to sit there for 15 minutes to make sure you don't have a reaction. How do we handle that with this?
What we're planning on doing, and that is one of the products we're working on, frankly. We're working on it early on with some of the big companies. But the idea behind all this is that you're still going to use a physician. There's still going to be a prescription given. You're going to use your electronics, whatever it is, your phone, your laptop, to give advice and information. You have I know, like with my wife, having virtual calls with her physician. She had her hip done just before the pandemic, so the rest of it was all virtual. But we believe that that's the same thing that we'll have. Or if it's really necessary and it's a concern, a safety concern, you can go to the pharmacy and pick it up, just like you did before. But self-administer it and just walk around the pharmacy or something like that. There's all kinds of ways, or park in the parking lot. So we think that's how that would be handled in the case where we think that there might be a safety issue, some reaction within 10 or 15 minutes.
Cool. Great. Representative Horner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions for you. Where do you manufacture the products out of?
Currently, we manufacture out of Center for Global Medical Innovation. We lease space there, and we manufacture all of the clinical supply. So the way drugs are developed, you go through all the clinical trials. But we have to be ready for commercial manufacturing because some of our products, whether it be measles, rubella, or we have probably a dozen products right now in development, they'll be ready for the market in about 2 years. And so we are building manufacturing in Germany right now.
Wonderful. And does this work with all vaccines? Any shot? Any?
Most vaccines, our limits would be, the way it's made is it's a mold. So that's pretty simple stuff. That's one important part. This is very low cost of goods, by the way. Our at scale, Gates, other Path, Gavi, all these people that we work with have done studies, and we're going to be about 60 or 70 cents without the vaccine or drug. So just like we're competing, or if not saving a little bit. But most of the vaccines would work because they're small and you just need exposure in terms of the dose. But our limits would be, once you fill those cavities, we have about 10 milligrams we can fill with. So we wouldn't be able to do antibiotics or something like that, but anything under 10 milligrams. So we wouldn't be able to do insulin, but we'd be able to do the GLP-1s and the analogs and stuff so that you could, for the type 2s and stuff like that, and do a lot of that work already.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Cool. All right. Representative Martinez.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Great presentation. My question is, and I think you already answered it, how does somebody know that it's effective? How does a somebody, a user knows that by pressing the button, is there a way that you can know that it's working, basically?
There's a lot of discussion around it. First of all, it would depend on what you're delivering. So if you deliver a flu vaccine, which is, you would actually see a bigger reaction than because you see the erythema even more than you would with a needle, which is it's erythema deeper. So you'd see a little bit of it, which resolves over a few days. You see a little bit of a redness kind of thing.
Okay.
You wouldn't feel it, but you'd see something. But that's not really the answer. I think that there's a lot of discussion around that. For me, when I get my flu shot at the pharmacy, and these days I do believe it's the cashier that's giving it to me, not the pharmacist anymore. I mean, I just think that's where we've evolved. But when I get it, I look away still too. I used to go in surgery, but I still look away. And then if I don't feel anything, I wonder, did I get it? I think that there's actually a confidence, piece of confidence when you're handed something, even for those who don't necessarily have a strong vaccination belief. I believe there'll be, and this is all marketing stuff, I don't know, but when you have it in your hand, you know it's there, you see the packaging, you read it, that's the drug, that's the vaccine. You put it on, you push it in, you click it, you see these little marks of where you've clicked it in. I feel that actually there'll be a bigger sense of confidence than there would be if someone, or at the Mercedes-Benz when the military was pushing needles in my arms. Like I would personally feel better about delivering it to myself or having a caregiver deliver it to you, that parent, things like that.
Got to follow up, Chairman, real quick. You keep saying your hand. Is there? Can you put it here?
You can put it, yeah, anywhere.
You can put it
on the
anywhere.
body. We actually are doing it on the wrist, right around there, on the children, and a little bit up in the hand, a little bit. The ones that we're doing. As long as you can push it in, you're fine.
You're fine. Okay, thank you.
All right, Representative Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Finally, a presentation that speaks my language. My background is in preclinical studies, so I do biomedical research with the preclinical studies. So my question is, what type of preclinical studies did you guys do for this, and how well did they go?
We are very, very published thanks to spinning out of Georgia Tech and having the support we had in Georgia. So I'll tell you every animal, you name them, all the way through to the monkey models, everything we've done through the Georgia Tech. A lot of grant work. Our company is affiliated with CDC, as I said, Gates, Gavi, CEPI, all the European organizations. We're affiliated with. So we did a ton, and a lot of it's published already.
All right.
And that's a good part. And then we've also done a lot of human work, which I've started to show.
Great. Yeah, follow up.
Of course.
And how well and accurate do you feel like the self-reporting will be once they take them at home? Like if someone takes a vaccine at home, how accurate do you feel like the self-reporting will be?
If it's that level of a vaccine, first of all, there's a lot of vaccines we don't need. We're not. That's a pandemic kind of response thing, right?
Right.
And again, it's sort of a market. I'll have my opinion on that, and others will. I don't. I can't really answer how they'll do it, but. We had a lot of challenges with that, even with the little cards, right? Which
Right.
I still have in my briefcase. I keep it with me all the time. But yeah, so I don't really have an answer. In the pandemics, we could come up with all kind of things. We go online. We could we could have sort of different things to use. But the thought is that you would use your technology to get access to the things you need back and forth.
Thank you.
Good. All right, thank you. We've got one more question, and we need to move on because we've got some more presentations, but Representative Burnell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How are these prescribed by the doctor?
Whatever it would be still prescribed by the doctor, yes.
Okay, and then how do pharmacists feel about these?
I haven't ever talked to pharmacists about them.
Okay, thank you.
Pharmacists should like it because if they're still going to get the prescription, give it to you. But what they won't have to do is they won't have a lot less shelf space. Remember that a lot of vaccinations, for example, and some therapeutics have to be refrigerated. None of this has to be refrigerated, so they'll like it for the convenience of what it does. Yeah.
Thank you.
And like I said, just one quick comment. What we're doing on a global impact basis is we're able to distribute into places where you can't distribute today. What that would mean for places like Georgia would be rural places where they don't have access. What I'm thinking in our mind, what we want to show is that we can actually create access in places where there's not a lot of access, frankly, for a physician. Yeah. Thank you to Georgia Research Alliance. I'm going to keep propping them up, and also the Georgia Bio Organization, which we utilize a lot as well.
Well, great. Thank you for your presentation. I've got one final question before we go to the Georgia Chamber Foundation. You said that there was, the maximum dosage was how much?
We can get about 10 milligrams into the current form I just showed you.
Okay. Would multiple applications where you get maybe 2 or 3 of those patches at different parts of the body, would that allow y'all to give larger dosages?
It would, or we could even change the size and the shape. But frankly, there's so much in front of us right now, but there are a lot of business cases. If I've got $1 a unit cost of goods, and the current price of somebody's drug, which is 30 milligrams, is $200, then it's pretty easy for them to use 3 instead of 1.
Gotcha.
A little less convenient, but that's a business model I don't think we'll push out because there's just so much opportunity to help. By the way, we also lead the world in this space in children and infants. As I said, we're down to 9 months now. We've done a lot of work as well as at Emory with children and infants, which that's where you'll have another great benefit for all of us, especially again in rural places in Georgia where mom can do it.
Great. Thank you very much, and wish y'all both much success.
Thank you.
All right, now we have Ms. Perry.
Good
Yeah,
morning, Mr.
thank you.
Chairman. Can y'all hear me okay? Well, it's so good to be with you all, and again, appreciate the opportunity on such a busy day. My name is Daniela Perry. I'm the Vice President of the Georgia Chamber Foundation for the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. At the foundation, we look at long-term trends and how best to capitalize on opportunities and mitigate risk for Georgia's business community. Just want to share a few numbers about kind of what the state's been looking like in terms of an economic overview. So fiscal year 22, we had another record year of economic development. More than 51,000 jobs created with $21.2 billion in investment from 358 projects. This job announcement number was 53% above prior economic development records, and the investment was 94% above prior economic development records. And what's really exciting is that 85% of this investment and more than 30,000 jobs were outside of Metro Atlanta. So we're seeing this statewide. This is across the state. This is something that's great, which when you're hearing examples of different companies like this, you want to see these companies across the state. You don't want zip code to be a barrier to success or preventing a great idea from becoming a great company. So at the Chamber, we're really focused on our building the new Georgia economy. I think we all can understand that there's been some giant fluctuations over the last few years, and we want to be focused for the future to build long-term economic prosperity. So we've got 3 pillars that we focus on. Those are infrastructure of the future, economic dynamism, and the war for talent. So to that end, by 2033, we would like to grow our GDP by $189 billion, fill more than 400,000 job postings, and support more than 25,000 startups and small businesses like the ones that y'all heard today. So certainly, aspirational goals that we're really committed to. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the economic dynamism portion because that really focuses for us at the Georgia Chamber, where we're focused on those small businesses and startups. A couple of rankings just to give you a picture of where Georgia stands right now. Georgia ranks first in the Southeast for venture capital, which is very exciting when we're thinking about growing these new companies. Georgia ranks 4th in GDP growth. So as we're thinking about the full scope of our economy, everything we're doing, we're really at the top of the pack in terms of growing our economy as a whole. Georgia also ranks 5th for the number of small businesses, so showing that we've got a very robust sector. And of course, the majority of Georgia businesses are small. And Georgia also ranks 17th for patent creation. So again, as we're thinking about these really innovative ideas, do people see Georgia as a hub for how you can scale, things like Micron and things like Codoxo? People are seeing that we're a leader in this space. And as a mother of an 11-month-old, I would love one less reason to go into my pediatrician's office. So the idea of giving a shot that way and saving her from the needle would be wonderful. So this year, too, as we were thinking again about this new Georgia economy strategy, how do we truly think about how do we transform our economy? We published our first economic competitiveness red book. I believe all of y'all should have received it at the beginning of session. If you haven't, we've got some copies here, too. But really looks at how Georgia compares to other states across the nation. Are we truly remaining our competitive edge so that we're able to, continue to drive growth, investment in the state? So wanted to pull some stats for that just to show you kind of how we're looking in the small business sector. So over the last 5 years, Georgia's experienced 55% growth in the number of business applications, which puts us at 6th in the nation, which is a great place to be, showing that people see Georgia's a great hub for business, again, a great place to scale their ideas. We also pulled this for the county level just because we wanted to show people of what does it look like if I'm, in Americus, if I'm in Dalton, what does this mean, how do I compare? We actually saw the greatest growth in our hub communities. So you'll think of that as Macon, Augusta, Columbus, those job centers that are outside of Metro Atlanta. And then that was actually followed by rural communities and then Metro Atlanta. So again, that growth is what we're looking at, is you're seeing that expand in other parts of the state. When we're looking at entrepreneurship data, Georgia ranks 3rd in the nation in terms of percent of adults becoming entrepreneurs per month, which is great. Again, people see this as a great place to do business. Our business climate's remaining really, really strong. People know that we're the #1 state in the nation in which to do business for 9 years running, and they want to grow here. Georgia also ranks 9th in startup early job creation. So this is the number of jobs that are created by startups in their first year. So again, people are coming up, getting good ideas, and they're not just getting good ideas, but they're hiring people and saying, like, let me build more companies, let me scale this. I think one thing that we've seen as an opportunity is that Georgia actually ranks 35th in startup survival rate. So as we're thinking about how do businesses sustain, past those critical 5 years, do they have the social capital? Do they have the education, mentorship, access to capital, all of those things to maintain, grow, and build, and become larger businesses in the state? So we certainly see that's a huge opportunity. Of course, instances like the Georgia Research Alliance are really being critical in that access to capital piece. I know some of the universities have also created entrepreneurship certificates for their students, so you can kind of get that additional training while you're in college. How do you build those ideas? And then the Georgia Department of Education has created a partnership as an add-on to the pathways within CTAE, so you can get kind of that entrepreneurship education in K-12. Certainly, though, we want to think about all of those things that relate to operating costs, and I know our chair will talk a little bit about some of those things, how you maintain operating costs that are rising in today's economy. So I'll pause there, and I want to give the rest of our time to our chair, but would be happy to take any questions if you have them.
One question, Chairman Colbert.
Chairman, let me back up. Not so much a question as a statement. Can you remind everyone who your dad is?
Former Representative Dave Belton.
It was an absolute honor to serve with him. We were elected together, served with him for 8 years. Great guy, and I'm absolutely jealous of him. Today, last night, he posted a picture. He's flying into Oklahoma City. You've probably seen it on Facebook with the sun going down on the horizon. Beautiful picture. Anyway, tell him we said hey.
I will, thank you. Yeah, he's enjoying flying Delta jets and being a grandpa. So, all good things.
Great. Good bit of information. All righty. And that's it for
Great.
that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And then I'll introduce the chair of our Small Business Policy Council, Daryl Rochester with Rochester and Associates.
Great. Mr. Rochester, thank you. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. So I am President and CEO of Rochester and Associates. We're based in Gainesville, have an office both in Gainesville and in Fayetteville, Georgia. We have about 50 employees. Just kind of help you understand us a little bit as a firm. We're a civil engineering land surveying firm. Rochester deals with, and one of the things I wanted to bring to your attention, I'm sure you're aware, but I wanted to share with some things that we deal with from a legal perspective, things that we fight. Tort issues are a big issue for us, and I wanted to share that with you because we start looking at what is that actual cost to us as a company. So I want to share with you kind of how it works. A lot of our clients are large-scale master plan developers, if you will. So they're doing large-scale projects. The Windward development up in Alpharetta, as an example, is one of our projects. Lake Lanier Islands on Lake Lanier is one of our projects with Virgil Williams, if you know Mr. Williams. We did the original environmental permitting for Atlantic Station right here at 17th Street. And we're working for some folks on the south side of town, specifically Dan Cathy, related to the Trillis development and movie studio down there. So those are just to kind of give you a feel for who our clients are. what we're discovering is that there is a whole gambit of attorneys who are looking to try to find ways to extort, if you will, and I'm going to call it that only because that's how I feel about it. I'm going to give you my feelings on it a little bit, so it's maybe a little jaded, if you will, but they're looking to find ways to extort money out of wealthy land developers. And so what we're finding is that they have discovered that their insurance companies will settle these matters rather than going to court. It's far more economical for them to do that, and then they're doing it. So what happens to us as a consultant is when the developer gets sued, the developer turns around and says, well, I hired this engineer, and I hired this surveyor, and I hired this contractor, and I hired this other consultant, and they sue everybody else to drag them in. So they said, well, it couldn't be us. We hired all these other professionals to do their job. And so in some cases, that is someone at fault. But truthfully, in many cases, in our situation is, we find that there's absolutely nothing that we've done wrong, but we get drug in. So I want to help you a little bit of a recent situation. I'm not going to name names, but it was a fairly large-scale development. There is a lake downstream of the development, and a group of homeowners decided to sue the developer because they felt like the development had silted in their lake. The developer had multiple times had EPD come out and evaluate, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers come and evaluate, and they found absolutely nothing wrong with what was being done. No sediment had been released from the site of any substance whatsoever. So you can imagine that in any development, you're going to have a staining of the water. We have laws that require that the certain standards are met and so forth. The developer had met those standards, but the true issue is, this lake had been there for, over 100 years, and no maintenance had been done. So it had silted in over just by natural erosion through the years and filled in. They discovered that there was a very small staining on the surface, and so they decided to sue the developer to completely clean up their lake and dredge the lake, if you will, for all that had been done for literally 100 years. At the end of the day, they were suing for about a $5 million claim, okay? And that's what they were coming after the developer for. The developer turns around and looks at all of us and says, hey, clearly it wasn't us, it's one of you guys, and so we start the process. After the developer had spent about $1 million trying to defend themselves and all the consultants who were involved, they finally got to the point where the plaintiff was willing to have mediation to discuss the matter. So we sat down, and it started at $5 million. We got it down to 3.8, and then discussions fell apart. From there, then they went back and started coming back to all of us and saying, okay, what can you chip in to try and get this matter settled so we don't end up in court? Now, here's an interesting fact. In law, in matters that relate to the Clean Water Act from the U.S. federal government, if there is 1% at fault by the developer or whomever that is the defendant, they are on the hook for 100% of the legal bills for the claim. The attorneys, in some cases, will take those claims and overinflate their hours to a massive number to the tune of millions of dollars of legal fees on a matter that may have only taken them a couple of hundred or maybe $250,000 worth of fees. So they'll overexpand what they really believe, what's truly the case. So here's the situation for us. We have insurance, obviously. We buy professional liability insurance to help protect us. On this particular matter I'm referring to, just at the end of last week, it looks like it's going to get settled at the tune of about $1.3 million when no one really did anything wrong. Okay? Now, how does that trickle down? To us, as a small business, we have to buy professional liability insurance to protect us from situations like this. Our current deductible for that insurance is $50,000. So that's coming out of our pocket before the insurance kicks in anything. Okay, so we're paying $50,000. The insurance company is now kicking in for our portion $600,000 to settle a matter when we had no fault whatsoever. Okay, none. There was nothing pointing to us to say that we did anything wrong. So what I want to share with you was, as I've looked at this and I tried to say, okay, how much did we spend on a matter like that? That's $50,000 that we spend as a firm. And I will tell you that we have anywhere from 1 to 2 of these and maybe even 3 in some cases, going on almost every year. Okay, now they stretch over a 2 or 3 or 4 year period in some cases. But what we ended up doing, I went back and looked and said, all right, so if we had 50,000 time that's lost, so that's what we paid attorneys and what we paid our own people. And our own people was in addition to that. That number ended up being, for that particular matter, was about another $25,000 that we paid for our own people. So let's say $75,000 is what's coming out of our pocket. But in addition to that, we've paid for our professional liability insurance. We paid almost $70,000 for 1 year. Okay, so we're paying $70,000. Then we have to turn around and we got to pay a deductible plus our people. So now I'm in for about let's say $150,000 kind of number is what we're at. For a small business, that's a heavy burden. Okay. The other thing I went back and looked at, and I said, what is our other insurance costing us? So our professional liability insurance. Now we had no claims up until this claim. Okay. So over a 5-year period, our professional liability insurance increased 40%. Okay, 40% over a 5-year period. It went from $49,000, or right at $50,000, to right at $70,000. Okay, our auto insurance, 0 claims over a 5-year period. We've had no claims whatsoever. Went from $22,000 to $57,000. Okay, it went up 155% in a 5-year period with no claims. So the thing I wanted to get you to see, and our total insurance package, if you look at the insurance as a whole, it went up $55,000, which equated to about a 55% increase over that same period for all of our business insurance. So I want to share that with you because this is a serious impact. Now, fortunately for us, we're strong enough that we're able to absorb and deal. Now, say absorb. We're able to deal with those kind of numbers. But a lot of small businesses in our state, if they get hit with that, they're out of business. I mean, there's no I can pay $50,000, $60,000, $150,000 out of pocket and survive. So I would encourage you to recognize that this is a big issue. And small businesses in particular are hit very hard with this, and I think it would be something appropriate for the legislature to look at very seriously. That's what I had for you this morning.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Being a small businessman, I recognize those issues, and we need to continue this conversation. Representative Bernal, number 12.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. And while I empathize with you to a point, because I do know, first of all, I am a retired educator, and my brother and father are both lawyers. So one thing I noticed down here, maybe you could get him to study the fraud in lawyers. Since you're saying they charge a lot of money. But more seriously, there are several. I live in Clayton County, and I know in Clayton and in Fayette, there were 2 subdivisions where now from the river or from a lake or whatever source of water is damaged. When it rains or does something, it floods their houses. And so at the last meeting, I was at the first, people were making excuses. And then finally one resident said, well, who's the lawyer? Who should we sue? Because that's what we need to know. And so once you buy a house and, it seems like everything's okay and that the engineers or whoever is doing all the studies of the land have done what they're supposed to do. But then once you get in that house and these things start happening and nobody wants to take blame, that becomes a really serious problem for that resident because they can't just all of a sudden just move someplace else. First of all, there are no places for them to move with the housing shortage. And so something has to be done on that end also to resolve those issues so that those homeowners have somewhere to go.
Sure. I don't disagree with that at all. And then we see situations where we'll come in and help evaluate those type of situations where in some cases the builder built a house in the floodplain. Mm-hmm. In some cases the homeowner made a decision to build somewhere that they shouldn't have built. And in other cases it's true, a negligent act on someone's part. It could have been the developer, it could have been the homeowner, could have been the builder, could have been the engineer. There's a lot of different variables on that, but that certainly is a real issue. The situation I'm talking about is a situation where no one's done anything wrong, and clearly there's a pretty strong attack, if you will, on the insurance. And basically the attitude is, well, it's just insurance. You're not paying for it. Well, yeah, we are. That's the point of sharing how much our insurance is increasing, because we're really finding that that is the case. But yes, you're right. There are certain situations we evaluate those as well and find that from time to time.
Thank you.
Cool. No, Representative Burnell said y'all need to get with the CODOCs and work with them and find out what, maybe there's another opportunity here for y'all.
Sure.
We recognize, I'm in small business, and anyone in small business has been subject to what I would consider frivolous lawsuits, where, I would like to meet with you further, maybe offline.
Yes, sir.
If you've got some suggestions on how we can approach that. The situation where I think a lot of times the people bringing forth the lawsuit don't have any skin in the game.
Agreed.
And when they don't have any skin in the game, they don't have anything to lose. They tend to, I know from discovery and stuff like that, just make it expensive and time consuming for the people involved.
Yes, sir.
And make you want to settle for the nuisance rather than for anything else. And I find that, and this I'm speaking personally, I'm not speaking for the committee, but I find that is a travesty to our legal system.
Agreed.
So, but with that being said, I want to thank all our presenters. I encourage our members that are left that didn't have to go to rules to stay and talk. And I served with your daddy as well. So, and I'm a pilot as well, not a commercial, but I'm a pilot. So we talked a lot about flying. But with that, thank you again. Our meeting's adjourned. Cool.